in mourning, searching for answers. The grief that we currently carry cannot be denied. It weighs heavily on our hearts and threatens to dampen our view of the bright and prosperous future that lies within our reach. I take this opportunity to remind every Grenadian that the success of the future we seek to build depends on our collective efforts. The violent acts of recent weeks are a sad reminder that the actions of a few can derail our shared progress, plunging families into deep despair. I implore all citizens to please think before you act. Think about your future. Think about your family, your neighbor. Think about the many individuals that may be affected by your actions. Every act of violence affects our entire community, both emotionally and economically. It may not be the most obvious correlation, but acts of violence affect the lives and livelihoods of Grenadians across the island. We continue to be blessed with a generally safe community. But we must do all that we can to protect our peace and protect the safe and serene beauty of our homeland. During these trying times, it is imperative that we band together as one, united and steadfast in our determination to overcome these challenges as one people and one family. The Bible reminds us in Galatians chapter 6, verse 2, that we must carry each other's burdens. Many of our people, including our youth, are struggling to cope with an ever-changing and increasingly fast-paced world, where societal expectations fuel heightened levels of anxiety and depression. Some of our young people, and adults as well, are struggling to find the right avenues to express their emotions and lack essential conflict resolution skills. The negative effects of a 2-year pandemic, paired with many of the global economic challenges, including the cost of living increases, also continue to affect many individuals. So now, more than ever, we must be each other's keepers. We are blessed to live in small communities where, with some effort, we can truly make a difference. I encourage each person to reach out to their loved ones, friends, and neighbors a little more often. Check on their well-being and offer a listening ear to those who may be silently suffering. I implore churches and community leaders to continue to play an active role in driving community engagements, providing opportunities for connection, understanding, and healing through after-school programs and activities. As a government, and in partnership with local NGOs, we have several initiatives in place to assist citizens who may need additional support. The Psychosocial Support Unit in the Ministry of Social and Community Development, Housing and Gender Affairs is one such initiative and serves to strengthen good mental health and resilience among citizens. We intend to strengthen community policing and engagement, but we are interested in getting to the root issues that have been manifested in violence within our communities. I call on every citizen to actively make an effort to be kinder in our interactions with one another. I paraphrase Mahatma Gandhi when I say that the simplest acts of kindness can be more powerful than 1,000 heads bowing in prayer. Let us nurture a spirit of compassion in our communities. Together, little by little, we can foster a culture of understanding, respect, and peace, where every life is cherished. It is vitally important that we take care of our physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual health, as all aspects are interconnected. Sadly, in our society, we often neglect the mental and emotional, viewing these areas of human development as weak. It is time that we break this false narrative that is causing too many of our people to suffer in silence. It is also time that we embrace better physical care of our bodies. Improving our health system is a major step. However, effective physical care will require a mind shift from many of our people towards regular health screenings, healthy eating patterns, regular exercise, and maintaining a healthy weight. Non-communicable diseases in the form of heart attacks, strokes, diabetes, hypertension, and cancers are the leading cause of premature deaths in the Caribbean and in Grenada, and pose a serious threat to the health and development of many Grenadians. Finally, spiritual health is as important as the other areas of well-being. Provide a sense of connectedness, inner peace, and a broader perspective on life. Moving forward, as we move forward in this new season, let us not forget the resilience that resides within each and every Grenadian. We are a people of strength, forged by the challenges we have faced throughout our history. I have no doubt that with determination, we can overcome these trials and emerge stronger than ever before. May the wounds of our nation and the wounds, particularly of the families of the victims who've been affected by these acts of violence, be healed. And may the memory of those we have lost guide us in our pursuit for a better future. May God continue to bless all of us. Thank you. I want to share with the nation two things. One, some statistics provided by the Royal Grenada Police Force as it relates to crime. And then two, some of the interventions that are currently taking place, both from a government perspective, from a government and NGO, as well as from a community perspective. So I will start with some of the statistics, and I'm referring to the statistics because it's important for us to have perspective, to also to remain calm, and to not give in to anxieties, to our fears, to not become depressed, because we certainly accept that one crime is a crime too many. One homicide is a homicide too many. One suicide is a suicide too many. But we also have to have some perspective and actual facts so that we do not escalate or make the situation worse. And it is important at the end of the day for us to do all that we can to minimize and prevent the homicides, the suicides, and any other acts of violence. Now, I will start with the suicides for the year 2023. Certainly, in the last 2 weeks, we've had a lot of attention arising from the suicide or alleged suicide of two young women, one of whom is a prominent and well-known attorney at law from a prominent family. But the statistics sadly also reflects that for the year we've had, in addition to the alleged suicides by the two young women, 4 suicides committed by men whose ages range from 50, 57, 49, and 67. And therefore it demonstrates that mental illness is no respect of sex and no respect of age. And statistically, it means that we've had persons who are in their mid-50s and 60s committing suicide at double the rate of young persons. And so when we say that many of our citizens are suffering in silence, it is not just young people. It is adults, and in many cases, senior citizens as well. And so it's important for us that when we look at the interventions that we need in our community, that we do not over-focus or only focus on young people, but obviously that we pay attention and focus on our adults and our senior citizens as well. Compared for the same period between 2022 and 2023. Last year, for the same period, we would have had 3 homicides. This year, we are indeed at an alarming number of 14 homicides. And there is no doubt, therefore, as I've said, one homicide is one homicide too many. And that many of these homicides occur in situations where if the persons engaged in conflict resolution, if they had the skill set needed to talk through their disputes or their differences, that the acts of violence would not have happened, nor would the loss of life. And so it's absolutely critical that when we look at these situations, that we ensure that we take a preventative approach to the loss of life rather than a reactionary approach. And certainly we accept the Royal Grenada Police Force, which has the responsibility for law and order in our society, will have to do more to ensure that we minimize the risk of further homicides for the year. One other area, and I've spoken about that as Minister of National Security on several occasions already, is the increased interdiction of illegal firearms. Last year, as of this time, 16 illegal firearms were interdicted. As of this year, we are at 31. So to that extent, we certainly wish to commend the Royal Grenada Police Force in ensuring that the interdiction rate has stepped up and that we've been successful in doing so. But it also points to a dangerous trend in our view, which is the proliferation of firearms within our communities. I've indicated that the government's policy on this is that we will take a zero tolerance to firearms. But we also have to appreciate that the firearms are not made in Grenada. They are brought into Grenada. And this is not just a Grenada problem, but a regional problem. And we have, at a regional level, been advocating and addressing this issue with our partners in the United States in particular, because the majority of the firearms come from the United States. We recognize, therefore, that beefing up our screening and our security at our ports of entry, particularly at the seaport, is going to be critical. And so the Grenada Ports Authority is taking steps to be able to get the necessary screening that can allow for the screening of barrels and so on, so that we can detect attempts at introducing illegal firearms into our communities. As you're aware, we are also stepping up. And in recent times, we were blessed to have received a donation from the United States of America that would allow us to better patrol our ports and our coastline to continue the interdiction of illegal firearms. The other main areas of criminal offense, drug offenses. In 2022, as at this time, the Royal Grenada Police Force recorded 128 offenses. In 2023, it has recorded for the same period 150 offenses. Housebreaking and stealing, 2022 at this time, the number of cases recorded was 93. This is down significantly for the same period. The number of cases recorded is 54. Stealing, the number of cases recorded 897 for the same period. For the period 2023, there's an increase of 1,060. Sexual crimes, for the period 2022, the figure recorded for the same period was 202. There's a significant decrease for the period 2023. It is down to 138. And the miscellaneous threatening language, last year 1,147, and this year 1,246. Regrettably as well, we've had 3 road fatalities for the year. Last year, at the same period, we were 5. So the number is down by 2. So, action. One. So, from the perspective of the Ministry of Social and Community Development and the various initiatives that the government is engaged with NGOs to address the necessary intervention amongst our young people. And I want to stress that some of these initiatives are ongoing, some of these initiatives will be coming on stream, but it is just the tip of the iceberg. We need a whole of society approach to address the issue of violence, to address the issue of behavior, to ensure that our people, not just our young people, but all our citizens, feel a sense of hope, a sense of belonging, and are confident that there is someone that they can reach out to in the event they are feeling anxious, in the event they're depressed, and that they're aware that the entire society cares about their well-being and their life. So I will just give some feedback as to what some of those initiatives are. There are a number of them. There is the Youth Resilience, Inclusion and Empowerment Program, or YRE. This is a collaboration with the United States Agency for International Development, or USAID. This aims to empower youth by promoting inclusion through mentorship and facilitating professional development opportunities. There's the Carry Secure 2.0 project, which is implemented by the United Nations Development Program, or the UNDP, and it facilitates the analysis of data to improve the country's capacity to identify the root cause of youth crime and design policies, strategies, programs, and interventions to mitigate these tendencies. And this program is important because oftentimes adults and senior citizens make comments about youth or youth behavior with no actual facts and no actual data. And so we actually need the data to look at what are the crimes young people are committing. Why are they committing those crimes? What is the age range that they commit those crimes are? What are the factors that would have led them to commit the crimes? And what interventions have happened after, so that we can design necessary policies to make sure that less of our young persons are at risk for being branded as criminals or engaging in criminal activity. There is the OASIS program, which is an opportunities to advance and support youth for success. That has been implemented in conjunction with the Organization for Eastern Caribbean States and will primarily focus on increasing the diversion of youth, from young persons away from courts and custodial sentences, because we recognize that there is a high tendency, if young persons are given custodial sentences and go to prison, there is a high probability of repetition. And so we need to ensure that we do not rush to criminalize our young people or criminalize their behavior and actually turn them into career criminals. The Ministry of Social Development, a number of approaches are ongoing. Currently, young persons who have been identified as being at risk to offend are referred to the probation unit in conjunction with the police authorities. And they are taken into what we describe as the alternative program. That program exposes young persons to life skills, conflict resolution, anger management, leadership skills, and the ability to discuss the issues that confront them. They are given the opportunity to speak, to talk, to engage with persons. It is not a lecture series, but an active participatory approach that allows the young persons to recognize that they have the ability to change their lives. There is training to support the reconciliation and restorative justice practices through mediation for youth. And I'm a big fan of mediation because it allows young persons, as well as adults, to own the solutions to the conflicts that exist between themselves and other persons. So teaching young people, youth and young persons the skills necessary for mediating the conflicts is something that we are keen to support. Therefore, the training of mentors and community members in this process is being rolled out, and we expect that this will help members of the community, as well as young persons, to be able to improve their behaviors, to strengthen civil society engagements, and to provide effective leadership and restore relationships, because this is key amongst our communities, amongst our villages. If there are disputes between families or between individuals, we have to be able to ensure that when we resolve those disputes, that the relationship is improved and restored, so that going forward, these disputes do not reoccur or new disputes do not happen. The OASIS program, I addressed this one already, parenting. And the Minister for Social and Community Development, the Honorable Senator Thomas is very keen on supporting this. Parenting is crucial, and it is one of the main approaches being used to help young persons, particularly young persons with children, to ensure that they have the necessary parenting skills to help them to become proper parents. Because proper parenting strategies certainly can help to reduce delinquency and deviance in society, and we continue to implement the parenting sessions. Last week, for example, parenting training was conducted in the island of Carriacou. Next Monday, the probation unit will continue with its summer program. The program is specifically targeting young people in conflict with the law, starting on Monday, 24th July. The location is upstairs, the fish market located on Melville Street, and the program will be conducted 3 times weekly, in the first instance for 1 month as a pilot, and then we intend to continue rolling it out throughout the length and breadth of Grenada. At the prison, there is the No Turning Back initiative, which continues in conjunction with the probation unit to visit the prison to work with young offenders, giving them tips on how to ensure that they do not re-enter the prison system. At the Backlit Rehabilitation and Juvenile Center, a program has recently been instituted called the Reach and Teach program. The program aims to ensure that young people leaving the center will be walking into meaningful engagements and jobs or apprenticeship or entrepreneurship to ensure that they have the necessary means to survive. And finally, in conjunction with Dr. Chaitan, the ministry is engaging currently every Thursday for 12 consecutive Thursdays, a program in Guave targeting young people in Guave and St. Mark on behavior modification through the probation unit. So I've simply given examples of these programs from a government and NGO perspective. But I'm also aware that there are several Grenadians, several church leaders, even political parties, including the National Democratic Congress and the New National Party, that have taken initiatives to ensure that we can target young persons, to ensure that we can target adults who may be depressed, who may be suffering from anxiety, or who may be having a difficult time, or who may have disputes or differences at a community or individual level. So, for example, in St. Patrick's, where some of the more unpleasant homicides took place, particularly amongst the young persons, the Royal Grenada Police Force, in conjunction with Pastor King and the church community there, as well as in conjunction with the MP for the area, the Honorable Dennis Cornwall, have had several interventions and meetings and engagements with the communities to ensure that the hostility, the anxiety, the hurt, the pain subsides, so that the community members recognize that we all must coexist in harmony. And it makes no sense to talk about reprisals or continuing the violence or the loss of life. I give this as one example. In Parliament this morning, the Honourable Member of Parliament for St. Andrews Northeast pointed to the New Nationals Party youth event, which according to her was also aimed at addressing youth behavior. Ongoing at this point in time, starting from this Thursday, the National Democratic Congress Women's Arm, in conjunction with Dr. Chaitan, will also be engaging with several seminars to teach people coping skills, to ensure that people understand what is depression, how can we treat it, how can we spot it, how do we destigmatize it, because oftentimes, sadly, we have a culture in our society where persons who suffer from mental illness have been stigmatized, oftentimes dehumanized, and when that happens, we simply worsen the illness. And oftentimes, there are tragic consequences, not just in terms of suicide, but oftentimes, sometimes violent acts involving members of the community or involving law enforcement. So I want to thank all of the citizens of Grenada who've expressed their concerns, who've prayed, who sought to be kinder, who sought to, in their own way, help to address the situation. This is something that impacts all of us, and we have to ensure that we take a collective approach, that we take a people and community first approach to ensuring it. I want to end again by expressing my own profound condolences to all families who've lost a loved one in recent times, whether it's through sudden death, whether it's through suicide, whether it's through homicide, or prolonged illness. We certainly ask the families to cherish your loved ones in the memories. We ask your friends, families, and the wide community to remember you in their prayers and thoughts. and I assure our Grenadian public that we will emerge from this stronger, more united, and more resilient. Thank you. I'm happy to take any questions members of the media may have.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister Mitchell. Members of the media, you've gotten a lot of information there as it pertains to crime and different programs that come on stream. Before I invite the first member from the media to pose a question to Prime Minister Mitchell, PM, I'd just like you to just give us elaborate a little further for us on one of the important programs that you mentioned, which is the mentorship program, as whether or not if there is a timeline for that to come on stream, because we see that as a very important program based on what we've seen happening within society if we have good mentors among not only our youth, but bridging the gap.
I'm going to have to verify from the Ministry of Social and Community Development whether the program already is ongoing or whether there's a start date for it. And once I have that information, I will certainly share it.
Sure. Do we have any members of... Do we have any member of the media ready to pose question to Prime Minister Mitchell? Prime Minister has shared a lot of information as it relates to crime and violent acts in the country. Over the past few weeks, we've been reading from a lot of Facebook investigators and everyone around as it relates to crime and what should and should not have been done. We have the Minister of National Security here, so I think it's only fitting that we, based on what he presented, that we ask him the pertinent questions to get the relevant answers. I see we have Linda Straker there. We have Miss Nancy Maguire. Any of you? Or is it that the Prime Minister was very clear in what he has delivered? Okay, so we will go to Ms. Maguire. Ms. Maguire, go ahead and pose your question. Ms. Maguire, I'm going to just ask you to repeat your question again kindly for us. Thank you. Okay, Prime Minister, I believe she's asking, with some of the presentation you made, if there will be specific officers trained in various areas to address these concerns.
Officers as in from within the Ministry of Social and Community Development?
Yes, in terms of, I think she's speaking towards the probation unit and so.
Yes, certainly. I mean, in capacity building is part of all of the programs, and training is an essential part of that.
Oh, she wants to know if the police officers will be trained in that aspect as well.
Right. So, well, the most of the programs I highlighted were not policing initiatives. They were social and community initiatives geared towards crime prevention and behavioral change and ensuring that persons don't engage in violence or see violence as a normal act. The policing aspect is a little different. The focus of the police would be on community policing. That's one. And that's important because obviously we need to know what are the hotspots. We need to know what are the areas where there's likely to be an issue, and be able to ensure that the police are there in advance of that happening. The second aspect that I want to say, and the police have actually admitted that robust policing is necessary because to some extent, some of the areas where are trouble spots or where you are likely to have more crime is known. And so proactive law enforcement is one of the things that the police has to take part in. But I also agree with you that the same skill sets that I spoke of in terms of the mentoring, in terms of the training, that it would also help if police officers are exposed to that training as well, because it allows them as well to be able to diffuse community issues. It allows them to be able to engage in mediation with the community members whenever there are disputes and so on. So it's certainly something that the police itself would benefit from in terms of ensuring that they are given the training in those aspects as well.
Thank you very much. We move now to Linda Straker. Ms. Straker, go ahead and pose your question.
Sorry. Hi, Linda. I'm not sure if you're hearing me. Are you hearing me? No, I'm having extreme difficulty hearing you. So perhaps if we can just bear a moment to see if there's anything we can do to improve the audio. So just hold one moment, please. Thank you.
Yes, we'll be back very shortly with Ms. Straker's question to the Prime Minister. We're just experiencing a brief technical glitch. Ms. Straker, in the meantime, can you please post your question within the chat, and I would read it out to, or you can send it via WhatsApp, and I would read it out to Prime Minister. I'm asking you if you can place your question within the chat. Okay. While we try to get that sorted out, Prime Minister, you also mentioned a bit about the Grand Bacolet Juvenile Center and the issue of being able to engage the youth in terms of, instead of decriminalizing, in terms of criminalizing them. What are some of the immediate plans to fully engage them?
Well, I will tell you this. I actually paid a visit to the Bacolet Center myself. And, you know, what struck me is the age at which the young men in particular are at the stage. We're talking young men as young as 11, 8 and 9. And when you speak with them, in many instances, they should not be at the center. Because you have instances where they may engage in what is normal boyhood behavioral challenges, disobeying a parental instruction, eating a loaf of bread when it's your sister's bread and it's not yours. And oftentimes our parents call on the authorities to then take their sons away. And it's parenting issues. So to a large extent, we need to ensure that we do not stigmatize young men simply because they may be robust in their response, or like any young man growing up, they may not obey commands given by their parents or by an elder sibling and criminalize them. So we have to ensure that we minimize actually people going to the rehabilitation center. That's the first thing, because you then get stigmatized. But secondly, I think it is critical that while they are there, we do not treat it as a prison. And to be honest, the minister knows, I think the management knows, that that is one of the things that we must change. Because the past approach has been to treat it as if it's a prison, and to treat the young men and women as if they're in prison, right? And the focus has to be on rehabilitation, and not treating them as criminals and treating them as prisoners. So basic amenities, their beds, they don't even have closets, they have lockers. And when you look at the state of the lockers, you couldn't even put canned goods in the lockers, and they're expected to put their clothing there, right? But when you get there, what you see is beautiful young men and women who want an opportunity to be a whole human being, who want an opportunity to paint, to draw. I mean, I looked at many of them, I saw their paintings, I saw their drawings and so on, right? I saw the farm work, the agriculture and so on that they're doing. So what we have to understand, and in many instances, they probably didn't expect that I would stop and engage with them, because they just thought I would pass, I'd be shown the building, but we stopped and we talked. The visit lasted much longer than anticipated, because oftentimes that's all a young person wants. They want the opportunity to be engaged, for someone to speak with them, to hear their version of things, to hear how they perceive or see the world. And we have to do a lot more of that, so that persons do not feel the first time you make a mistake, or the first time you say something you should not have said, or you speak in a manner you should not have spoken, or you behave in a manner you should not have behaved, that you end up in a situation where you're confined and treated as if you are beyond redemption. So that would be critical, and that's why it's important that they are given this skill set, so that when they go back in the communities, when they go back home, when they go back to the schools, that they understand what is happening. You know, I had a discussion with one young man. He said, I said, why are you here? He's like, well, I left home with a knife. I said, why did you leave home with a knife? He said, because another guy, I think, was threatening to beat him up. So I said, where's the other guy now? He says he's out. But I said, who's in the juvenile center? It's you, right? I said, so we have to make better decisions. But if he didn't feel he had someone that he could speak to about what was confronting him, then obviously he would feel he needs to protect himself and there's no help. And so those are some of the issues we need to address. And that's why at a community and a society level, we need to ensure that the young men know that there are other options other than saying the only way I can defend myself is by walking with a knife. I don't know if Ms. Straker audio is better.
She has posted a question. She's asking you, Mr. Prime Minister, can you tell us how the guns were confiscated? I guess when you made your statement as to making comparison to what was done in one period to the other.
Well, that's not a question I could answer. At best, I think that question could be posed to the Commissioner of Police, and I presume his team would feed him the information as to how the guns were confiscated. I don't have any data on how they were confiscated. There are one or two incidents I know of, for example, at the port, where we had an interception of a large cache of firearms which were brought in via container. This was widely publicized and so on. There are other instances where a firearm was confiscated in Carriacou and so on. So certainly those that are reported in the public, but I certainly would not have granular details as to how the police would have interdicted or confiscated the firearms. Is that?
Yes. Ms. Maguire is asking you as well as to whether or not there will be changes to the composition of the RGPF. I'm not sure if it's in context to what you're saying, that in terms of the different plans and programs that you mentioned that is going to be ongoing, but she's asking if there will be changes to the composition of the RGPF. I don't know if it is to fit in with what it is that you've mentioned.
No, well, at this point, the answer would be no. There are no plans to change the composition of the RGF.
Okay. And violence, in particular, gun violence, is now described as a public health issue, and this is coming from Linda Straker. And she's asking if you can say what are the specific public health prevention measures that will be employed by the government to reduce the impact.
All right. Well, as you're aware, we recently had a CARICOM symposium on this issue, where, in a sense, for the first time, I think we were grappling with whether we should accept that gun violence is a public health issue from a Caribbean perspective, on the assumption that thesis is accepted because of the impact it has on the public and on the community. I think from a strategic perspective, this is important. Guns are lethal, and they made to kill. That's the only purpose for having a gun. So even if it's sport rifles, it's meant to kill the animal or whatever it is you're shooting at. And so from a culture perspective, first and foremost, and from a society perspective, as I've said, the government's policy is that we will have zero tolerance for firearms. And that would influence everything we do. Starting with licensed firearms, you need to demonstrate that you actually do have a real need for a licensed firearm, one. Two, as I indicated previously, the guns come out of the United States. And so we have, from an advocacy level, from a security cooperation level, both from a bilateral perspective and from a regional level, we have spent extensive time, resources, and dialogue with our partners in the United States, both from the executive level as well as from congressmen and women who've been in the Caribbean and who've been visiting Trinidad, explaining to them that the U.S. government needs to do more to ensure that guns do not leave their borders destined for Caribbean nations. And we will continue to advocate, we will continue to work with them to ensure that that happens. From a border perspective, in the context of Grenada, as I've said, the Port Authority in particular, or Airport Authority, we have to ensure that we give them the necessary equipment that will allow for the screening of all cargo. Now, this is expensive and it will take some time, but we have to start. And I've said the Port Authority is on its way to procuring screening equipment that will allow it to screen barrels and so on in particular. Because the person who are smuggling guns are very creative. At the symposium in Trinidad, you would see examples of guns in conflicts, guns in flowers, guns in all kinds of means. So we have to ensure that our borders are protected, and at the ports of entry that we have the necessary screening equipment that would allow the screening of all cargo that's coming in. The second aspect, as I said, is beefing up our capacity via the Coast Guard to patrol our borders. Because as you're aware, there's PT Martinique, there's Carriacou, there's the Grenadines, there's Trinidad to our south. And to the south of Trinidad is Venezuela, right? And South America. And so we have to ensure that we can resource as best we can within our limited means and in reliance on our partners, that we have the necessary equipment that would allow for a more robust patrolling of our shores to make sure that we can intercept and interdict any attempts to bring firearms in. And oftentimes the firearms goes within the narcotic trade, particularly the cocaine trade from South America. And obviously at a domestic level, the police, without me being at liberty to say more, engage in very deliberate strategic actions to interdict, to gather intelligence, and to work on ensuring that they can bring in as many firearms as possible. I will admit that at a policy level, we've had some discussions as to whether gun amnesty would make sense. We have not resolved that issue. It is something we are still considering in conjunction with the Royal Grenadier Police Force. But again, you need to actually have data that these things will work. There's no point in having it if it will not work. I will indicate that at a policy level, though, the intention would be to amend the Firearms Act to have far stiffer penalties for persons found in possession or the trafficking of illegal firearms. So that's one policy issue that we intend to pursue. So I hope I've done some justice to the question that has been asked.
And we do have a final two questions for you. I think it's the second part to Ms. McGuire's question, where she was speaking to the changes to the composition of the RGPF. She's now asking for you to give more details, because she was speaking in terms of numbers. Will there be added numbers to the RGPF?
Oh, okay. Well, no, certainly one of the challenges the RGPF has been faced with is mission creep. As well as police officers engaging in a lot of activities that have been heaped upon them, which are not necessarily security related. And so from that perspective, we are looking at ensuring that we can beef up the numbers that the police have. So in areas where the police have been, I will use this word, outsourced to provide security, where the entity that is using them to provide the security can do so itself, our approach would be, in fact, to have the police officers go back to policing. So I'll give an example. At the port, as many as 30 plus police officers provide security to the port. The port authorities have already indicated to the chair, the government's perspective is that the port authority has to provide its own security. There may be need for top-level police supervision, but we feel the port authority, the airport authority, those areas that we need the police officers back in policing given the shortages of numbers. We certainly will also be looking to recruit more police officers because we recognize that there's a shortage, particularly boots on the ground. We need to ensure that there's more vibrant and robust and obvious patrolling, but we also have to rely on and use technology. And so from a policy perspective, the government will be looking to address this. So for example, the use of CCTV cameras at public hotspots. We will need the necessary legislation to do so. We need to have the necessary technology, but those are some of the issues that we'll be pursuing so that we can have coverage, for example, of our public spaces, the public markets, main bus routes, bus shelters, places where people congregate, so that we can at least have eyes on the place that would allow the police to react better. So yes, we certainly intend to increase the numbers. Our strategy as well is to ensure that the police officers who are in a sense outsourced and not doing co-policing can be brought back. Strategically as well, I think I've indicated that our policy will be one in which we pursue matters that could be done by civilians. For example, some of the immigration matters, the passport office. Really, this is stuff that could be done by civilians. And so we need the police officers to be back in policing to help with the numbers. Licensing and inspection of vehicles. These are matters that could be done by civilians. We certainly need the police officers there to be policing. So that's part of the overall strategic approach that we'll be taking to ensure that the police itself can beef its numbers up to do actual policing.
Thank you very much, PM. We now have the final question, and it's coming from Linda Straker, and she's saying that earlier in the year you mentioned there will be changes to the Firearm Act. Can you tell us what progress has been made in that area? That's part one. Then she's asking, what is the evidence that the guns are coming from the USA? And is there any evidence that guns purchased in the USA was found in Grenada? And that's the final questions. They're all coming from Linda Straker.
I don't know. I could tell you what the evidence is the guns were made in the USA, other than telling you the guns are coming from the USA. And I think I pointed out to one incident where a significant cache of firearms were intercepted at the port. The container came out of the United States of America. And the fact that the guns are coming from the United States is not disputed by our friends and partners in the United States. I think they accept that they need to help us do more, which is why they've been partnering with us to address this issue. As I've indicated, we are looking at increasing making amendments to the Firearms Act with a view of addressing the penalties that are associated with illicit firearms. And so we expect that this will be on our legislative agenda for the last half of 2023.
Thank you very much, PM. I just ask you to make some closing remarks. I know that we're already within the season. I don't know if you would get the opportunity to address again, but as you speak into the issue of acts of violence, and so if you just speak a few words towards that.
Yes, well, I think the Royal Grenada Police Force has had several consultations with promoters, event holders, with the Spice Mass Corporation, so that we can ensure that we provide a safe environment for the carnival. So certainly the Royal Grenada Police Force has its plan to address this. We also clearly recognize that when you have mass gatherings of persons, when you have a lot of entertainment, when you have a lot of consumption of alcohol, it is crucial to ensure that people can behave in a manner that minimizes the risk for unwanted behavior or for aggressive behavior. So there are things that I think the police is working on in conjunction with the promoters, ensuring there's a prompt start, prompt end to events, ensuring that there's adequate, not just police, but private security at the events, ensuring that people can get home safely. Because oftentimes that's part of the risk you face if people are lingering, and don't have transportation and so on. So as is customary, the Royal Grenada Police Force obviously would have, the usual stop and search, ensuring that they can, if people have knives and other things that they should not have if they're going to events and so on, that all of that happens. But I think, again, Carnival doesn't belong to the police. It belongs to us. And so it's important for us, for our people, our young persons, all of us who are taking part in the carnival activities, to understand that if you go and you fight, if you leave home with a knife, if you get too drunk because you lose control of yourself, that you are in fact marring and giving a bad rap to the very thing that you say you like, the carnival, the season. So it goes back to us again recognizing that we have to have collective responsibility for carnival, collective responsibility for friends or neighbors. If you notice that someone is drinking too much, stop them so that they can keep hold of themselves, so that they don't lose control of themselves. If you notice someone is drinking, you should ensure that they don't drive, right? You should pull, if you all want to go out, hire a bus. Go out with 10, 12 of you rather than each of you trying to drive and wanting to drink at the same time. So there are very basic common sense things that we can do to ensure that we have a safe and enjoyable carnival, and to make sure our property as well is safe. Ensuring that you lock your cars, parking in a place where there is light, or as I said, carpooling, ensuring before you leave home that you secure your home, that your homes are closed up and so on. So all of these things are things which over several years I've seen the police brief us on. It's important that we take it seriously so that we can protect our property, protect our loved ones, and that we can all have a safe and enjoyable carnival, and that Grenada remains the safest island in the Caribbean. Thank you.
Thank you very much, viewers. That was our Prime Minister, Honorable Dickon Mitchell. He held this special press brief to bring us up to date on the recent violent acts and untimely deaths within the country. He shared a lot of pertinent information, and for me, the important takeaways is the mentorship program that is going to be coming on stream. Each one looking out for each other. We have to do something to ensure that we can help each other to rise together. Mental illness and depression, all these different issues he spoke to. So we need to take time out to look around our communities and see where we can be of great help. On behalf of the entire production team here, I would like to say thank you very much for viewing. I am Sherry and Noel.